think we've just begun to learn how to think long term. Science is giving us more and more knowledge about how the world has actually gone over the past centuries, millennia, millions of years. And some of the deep, formerly mysterious forces that we're coming to understand, such as climate, that have these very long time frames, and that we have impact on, for good or ill. So we're now engaged in, it's as if we were terraforming Earth, as if it was a planet that we've just come to. And we're doing it very badly, or badly enough at present that we need to worry about it. But we don't have a choice of not terraforming Earth anymore. A city planet, a really urban planet, has got so much human stuff going on that the planet is now an artifact of human activities. Well, the story of the oak beams of New College, Oxford, I got from Gregory Bateson, and he got it from somebody who'd actually been there at the New College. And it's become a twice told story. Basically, when New College it was called New because it was built relatively late in the set of colleges at Oxford in the 14th century or something like that. And they, like everybody else, built a great big college hall, and it had a 30-foot or so cross inside, very high and big, beautiful oak beams up there. And in the 19th century, as Gregory said, some busy entomologist went up and fooling around up there and discovered that the beams were getting seriously weak because they were full of beetles. And then the college fathers got together, oh my God, what are we going to do? Where are we going to find trees of that caliber anymore? And so they called in the college forester, who hadn't been anywhere near the college in years because he's out managing the college lands hither and beyond. And they said, we're in trouble, we need big oak trees. And he tugged his forelock and said, well, sirs, we was wondering when you'd be asking, because it turns out that hundreds of years before, oaks had been planted and protected lo those centuries, because they knew then that oak beams eventually do get beetly and they need to be replaced. And so they planted trees that would be there when that need came up. And as Gregory says, that's the way to run a culture. The oak beams in New College, Oxford has become sort of shorthand as a way to refer to a thinking ahead that is basically infrastructural. I mean, great big beams. This is not the style of the building. This is not what kind of teaching is going to go on in the building. This is just the thing that keeps the rain out and lets people all dine together in this one big space, which you assume will continue to be a good idea. Okay, what would we do if we were looking forward 6 centuries from now? What are the oak beams in our world that we would like to be planting acorns and protecting their growth? And that's a really open question, because it's probably not oaks, but what is it? The idea of the clock of the Longnow, a 10,000-year clock, really has two forms. There's the mountain clock and a city clock. The city clock ideally would be in some busy city. Singapore was almost it. Jerusalem was almost it. Who knows, we'll eventually get a serious city clock. And it'll be a point of long-term reference that probably won't really last more than a few centuries, because cities turn over, they get bombed, various things happen. Water rises, they're on the coast. Things that are in the countryside and things that are underground last a real long time. So the idea of the mountain clock is because it's out in this case in serious country in eastern Nevada, and in a very strong mountain made out of Permian limestone that is dense, and anything that's in there is going to last for a long time. The idea is that to do the pilgrimage to the clock, to walk across this timeless countryside, climb up this timeless mountain, disappear into it, experience the clock, come out the top among bristlecone pines that some of them 4,000 and 5,000 years old and still alive, look out at 100 miles of pretty wild Nevada, and that is the definitive long view. This is not a metaphor, it's the real thing. and you've just had an experience, and now you got to get yourself down the mountain. And so it's, in a sense, building around an experience which is out of contemporary time. And one of the things we're trying to do is preserve the valley that you see from the mountains, a 500 square mile valley called Spring Valley. And it's in pretty good shape now. We're busy trying to further preserve it, restore it, protect it, make it part of the national park. And be sure that when somebody goes up the mountain, they experience the clock, they look out at the world has a timeless quality that they can see. And a sense that it will remain that timeless quality. What you then get from the clock and from the landscape around it is a feeling that you've got a telescope that's looking right through the centuries. And things are going to change like mad, but probably this clock is going to keep ticking, and that landscape is just going to keep being a sagebrush ocean. I kind of like incautious optimists because they're the ones who will try stuff rather than just expect other people to try stuff. Cautious optimist assumes nice things will go on. Somebody will make things happen. An incautious optimist says, actually, that's my job to make things happen. And the culture needs a fair number of those. Just one or two is not enough. And I think one of the things cities can do for civilization is attract a bunch of those incautious optimists together into critical masses where they set each other loose in a metaphoric fashion where they all suddenly start glowing in the dark. And that glow can be civilization-wide. Not every time, not even most of the time, but enough of the time to keep the civilization alive. We have this organization called the Longnow Foundation, which is fostering a long-term responsibility. And Longnow, what's that? The idea comes from Brian Eno and Peter Schwartz. Brian Eno had the notion that when we get into trouble, when our now is kind of a short now, it's just last week, this week, and next week. And that's all we take responsibility for. And Peter Schwartz said, well, civilization has been going on for 10,000 years, basically since the northern ice receded. We started having agriculture in cities. Civilization's story begins 10,000 years ago, nice round number. And so to be symmetrical, let's say, okay, then the next 10,000 years is an equal time frame, and assume that we're in the middle of civilization's story. We're not at the beginning of a new civilization. We're not at the end of the civilization. We're in the middle of the story. That's a normal thing to do. So how are we doing so far? You check on the story that we've got up till now. And what do we got in mind, or what do we want to keep possibilities open for the next 10,000 years? So the long now is 20,000 years long. And why not hold it in mind the way we hold last week, this week, and next week in mind as something that we bear relation to personally. We have responsibility for what goes on. We can schedule stuff over the next week. We can schedule it over the next few thousand years. You know, when are we going to go to Mars? Well, that's not a decision that necessarily you make in 1 year for something you're going to do the next year. When are we going to make sure that nobody's hungry in the world? You can decide all you want, but you're not going to make that happen in a year. You've got to figure, well, that's a half a century project, but it's worth taking on, so we'll do it. So all you're getting from this long time frame is a sense of responsibility, sure, but also a freedom not to have to accomplish everything right now, not to have to accomplish everything in one's own lifetime. One of the things the long now gets you to do is the ability to break through the barrier of your lifetime and take things that happened before you were born very seriously. As the truism says, much was decided before you were born. And much will be decided after we die. But we bear relation to that. We are part of that long decision-making process. And there's a comfort in it of the kind that people get from long-lived institutions. I've been in the military. People who stay in the military for their entire career have a sense of the long gray line of they can sing about the shores of Tripoli, and that feels personal to them. And they feel that that institution is going to carry on long past their career and their life, and they have some responsibilities to them. People who have a strong religious church affiliation have the same kind of sense. Some people can feel that about a city. Some can feel it about a nation. That's, I think, good stuff to have. These institutional, long time frame sets of references. That's the oak beams of New College, Oxford. That's assuming that there is going to be a New College, Oxford 5 centuries from now. And what do we do now to make sure that it's in good order?
Que acudir a la imaginación geométrica.
Of course, one has to draw on geometric imagination.
Porque la crisis de la ciudad
Because the crisis of the city
es fundamentalmente una crisis de imaginación,
is fundamentally a crisis of imagination.
que es el único desierto peligroso, el desierto de imaginación.
That's the only dangerous desert, the desert of imagination.